Hello there folks, and welcome to the Shit Card Legit Card Showdown, the third in a series of budget battles for frame rate fanatics. As the title suggests, the cards we are going to be testing today are legitimately good options for those of you who want to play some AAA titles at decent resolutions and frame rates. All of the cards tested today can be purchased for $110 or less based on their either new selling price or their average trending sold listing price as found on eBay. The cards we are going to be testing today are the RX 460, two HD 6950s in Crossfire, an HD 7850, an R9 270, the GTX 660, GTX 750 Ti, and finally joining us as the winner of the last Shit Card Showdown, the Radeon HD 6870. And here's a breakdown of all of the card stats and prices for you to peruse. Like last time, if you guys have any suggestions for cards to use in the next Shit Card Showdown, let me know. Both the HD 7850 and GTX 660 were suggestions from you guys, so I really do take all of your feedback to heart, so keep the suggestions coming. With that said, let's move on to the testing rules for this showdown. The criteria that we will be judging the cards on are frames per dollar and highest average frame rate. Points will be awarded to the winners, 7 for first, 6 for second, 5 for third, and so on in that fashion. The card with the most overall points at the end of the showdown will be crowned the overall winner. Now let's take a look at our benchmarking rig for this showdown as well as the games that we will be testing. As always, the test bench for this showdown won't be overly powerful. In fact, the system we will be using is an i5 650 overclocked to 3.8 GHz with 8 GB of DDR3, all on a fresh install of Windows 10. The games we will be benching will be Star Wars Battlefront, 1080p high settings, GTA 5, 1080p normal settings, The Witcher 1080p high settings with Hairworks disabled, Doom 1080p high settings, and finally we will be running the 3D Mark Firestrike benchmark. A couple of things to note: Doom was benched using the API that gave each corresponding card its highest frame rate, meaning some cards will be using Vulkan whereas others won't. For the Firestrike benchmark, the frame rate that we will be using is actually an average of the Graphics Test 1 and Graphics Test 2. This way we will be eliminating the CPU from this test. And one final thing to mention, I finally have use of a capture card. However, unfortunately for this particular video, I did not have it yet, so all future Shit Card Showdowns will be using it, so you can expect to see some better quality gameplay video in the future, but unfortunately not for this one. Anyhow, with that said, let's get on to our benchmarking. The HD 7850 was the overall winner for this test, walking away with 13 points scored. In terms of performance, the HD 6950s in Crossfire managed to steal the win, with the 7850 and RX 460 close behind. Surprisingly, the 750 Ti and the R9 270 didn't perform so well in this test. Not sure what was going on. I ran it a couple of times to make sure, but the results didn't change. And as a result, it puts them in last place overall in this test. And not too surprisingly, with an average new selling price of $110, the RX 460 was in last in terms of value despite its really good performance. In this test, the ever-venerable 750 Ti gets the win with 13 total points scored. With a really good price per performance, the 750 Ti gets first place in value as well. However, in terms of performance, the RX 460 manages to clutch a win with a small FPS advantage over the 750 Ti. The cross-fired cards performed well, however, due to their higher price, it puts them in last place for overall value. The HD 7850 manages a really great frame per dollar rating yet again. This was a very surprising result. The HD 7850 and R9 270 tied for first place with 12 points scored each. I was really expecting the Nvidia cards to shine, as The Witcher is generally considered to be much more favorable to Team Green. With that said, the GTX 660 does manage a respectable 4th place for overall frame rate and 3rd place for overall value. The 750 Ti trailed behind and was only worse than the aging 1GB HD 6870. Also, it appears as though The Witcher has very poor crossfire support, as the two HD 6950s only managed an underwhelming 26 FPS average. What? Did that just happen? It looks like the HD 6870, the winner of the last Shit Card Showdown, managed to pull out a victory in this test with a great average price and a phenomenally surprising performance. With a 54 FPS average, the 6870 was only beaten by the RX 460, which was running in Vulkan. I ran this test several times to be sure of the results, but they all came in the same every single time. One possible solution for this result is that I had to use a config edit for VRAM management to get this 1GB HD 6870 to even run on this title. If you're curious about what edit I used, you can check out my low-end Doom video, as that is the exact edit I used to get this card running on this benchmark. Anyhow, the GTX 660 performed great in this game as well, with a 51 FPS average. With such a low average price, the GTX 660 gets second place in frames per dollar and overall value as well. fantastic R9 270 and 7850 tied for first place with 11 points scored each. The HD 6950s managed to get the fastest overall frame rate average of 26.43, beating out the R9 270, which had the next highest with a frame rate of 23.89, closely followed by the RX 460. Not surprisingly, the HD 6870 got last place for average frame rate. The GTX 660 was middle of the road with a lower average frame rate, but a surprisingly good frame per dollar rating. With all that out of the way, let's move on to our overall winners. The fantastic Radeon HD 7850 is the card with the best value, scoring 32 points. The 7850 was 4 points above the next best card. With decent performance in all titles and with a low average cost of $60, the 7850 should be a clear choice for those of you who want the best bang for your buck in a cheap AAA system. The GTX 660 got a well-deserved second place in value with a middle-of-the-road performance in all titles and an equally as good price as the 7850. The GTX 660 scored 28 points for overall value. Bringing up the rear, the cross-fired HD 6950s only achieved 8 points for value. Being the second most expensive and only cheaper than the RX 460, and having dubious graphics support in some of the titles, the HD 6950s were dead last, at least in terms of value. Not too surprisingly, the brand new RX 460 was the best performing card by a lot. Scoring 32 points in average frame rates, it was 5 points higher than the next best card, which was the HD 6950s in Crossfire. The Radeon R9 270 came in a decent third place with 22 points scored, only slightly above the cheaper priced HD 7850 with 21 points scored. The GTX 660 was the best of the Nvidia cards tested today with 19 points scored. Having adequate performance in all titles and a cheap relative price, the 660 is a decent option for those of you who must have Team Green. The 750 Ti surprisingly fell behind the 660 with only 15 points scored. The 750 Ti is alright for those who don't have any extra PCI power plugs, but even still, there are better out there. And finally, the HD 6870 pulled up the rear with only 10 points scored. It's the cheapest option and only has 1 gig of VRAM, so it's not too surprising it came in last place. Alright, now let's get on to the overall winners. The distinguished HD 7850 was our overall winner with a combined total of 54 points scored. This card would be a great choice for anybody looking to get a GPU in the $60 price range. With support for DirectX 12 and Vulkan, the 7850, despite its age, should remain an adequate card for years to come. For those of you who root for Team Green, the GTX 660 would be a great choice as well. Coming in at second place with 47 points, this card had a middle-of-the-road performance, however still managed a great frame per dollar rating, allowing it to beat out the R9 270, which came in third place. In fourth place, the new RX 460 was the best performer, however due to its higher price and lower value, it only managed to get fourth place, beating out the overpriced, underperforming cross-fired 6950s. The HD 6870 and GTX 750 Ti were in last place with underwhelming performances in the titles tested, and in general being a really poor value. So there you have it. It really does seem that used cards are the way to go when it comes to getting the most bang for your buck. If you guys have any other suggestions for cards to use in this showdown or have any other ways to improve the show, let me know. Critical feedback is always welcome. As always, thank you folks for watching. May your frame rates be high and your prices low, and I will catch you folks next time.